The observation chamber was designed for silence, the kind that pressed against the ears and forced attention inward. Professor Elias Ward stood with his hands folded behind his back, eyes fixed on the training floor below. He did not interrupt. He never did, not until he was certain the moment mattered. Below him, 6 male researchers from the Keeler Union moved with careful precision around a waist-high console. Their frames were tall and angular, their movements disciplined to the point of stiffness. At the center of the platform rested the object of their focus, a compact resonance emitter, smooth, metallic, and deceptively simple. It was a tool meant to channel directed energy with surgical accuracy. In the wrong hands, it could shear through reinforced alloy. In the right ones, it was supposed to be elegant. Commander Threx held it. Threx was respected, feared, in some circles. His posture was rigid, elbows locked, fingers wrapped around the emitter exactly as prescribed by the Keeler Tactical Codex. Every joint angle was textbook perfect. The console chimed as he activated the device, and a narrow beam flared to life, striking the far target with adequate precision. Adequate. Ward exhaled slowly through his nose. He had seen this before on a dozen worlds and in 100 simulations. Different species, different tools, same assumption. That correctness was something written down, preserved, immune to context. Humans had once believed that too, until reality corrected them. Threx adjusted his stance minutely and fired again. The beam wavered, corrected itself, and struck the target's outer ring. A murmur of approval rippled through the observers. Data scrolled across the display, all green indicators, all within acceptable margins. Ward leaned forward, just slightly. One of the junior researchers, male, young by Keeler standards, glanced up at the observation window and noticed the human for the first time. His crest twitched, a subtle sign of uncertainty. The human professor was out of place here. Unarmed, unarmored, invited only as an academic courtesy. Ward met the gaze without expression. Threx powered down the emitter and rotated his wrists to relieve the strain. It was a small movement, almost unconscious. That was what finally did it. Ward spoke, his voice calm, carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. "Why are you holding it like that?" The words were not loud. They did not accuse. They simply existed. Every movement on the floor stopped. Threx turned slowly, eyes narrowing as he searched for the source. When he found Ward, his mandibles tightened. "Explain your question, human professor." Ward descended the steps at an unhurried pace, boots echoing softly against the metal. He did not gesture to the emitter immediately. Instead, he studied Threx, his stance, his grip, the tension locked into his shoulders. "You're following the manual," Ward said. "Perfectly." A ripple of irritation passed through the Keeler researchers. One of them clicked sharply. "That is not a flaw." "No," Ward agreed. "It's not." He stepped closer now, close enough to see the faint tremor in Threx's forearms, the subtle fatigue already setting in. "But it is incomplete." Threx straightened. The Codex was refined over 12 generations of conflict. It accounts for stability, energy conservation, and operator safety. "I don't doubt that," Ward said. His tone never changed, and somehow that made it worse. "What it doesn't account for is you." A hush fell. Ward finally reached out, stopping just short of the emitter. He did not touch it without permission. "Your species has 3 primary flexor groups in the forearm. Humans have 2. Your grip doctrine assumes symmetrical load distribution. But your musculature isn't symmetrical under strain." "That is irrelevant," Threx snapped. "The device compensates." "Until it can't," Ward replied. "Until something changes." One of the researchers scoffed. "This tool is not designed for improvisation." Ward smiled faintly at that. Not mockingly. Almost fondly. Neither was fire. Threx hesitated, then extended the emitter toward Ward. "Demonstrate." Ward accepted it with both hands. He did not assume the Keeler grip. His stance shifted subtly, weight settling through his hips, elbows loosening, fingers adjusting until the device seemed to rest rather than strain against him. It was not dramatic. If anything, it looked careless. A few of the observers exchanged glances. Ward did not activate the emitter. He simply held it. "This isn't about strength," he said. "It's about letting your body do what it already knows how to do." "And what would that be?" Threx asked. "Adapt," Ward said. He handed the device back. "You're fighting the tool. Humans learned a long time ago that tools always win that fight." Threx looked down at the emitter in his hands. For the first time, doubt flickered across his expression. "The results meet operational standards," one of the senior researchers said sharply. "There is no problem to solve." Ward nodded. "Then you won't mind proving me wrong." Silence stretched. Finally, Threx inclined his head. "You will explain your method in full. Under controlled conditions." Ward clasped his hands behind his back once more. "Of course." As he turned to leave the platform, his gaze lingered on the emitter, on the way Threx still held it. Rigid, controlled, correct. "For now." Ward allowed himself a small, private smile. The revision chamber was smaller than the simulation floor, designed less for performance and more for decision. Elias Ward stood near the transparent wall as Commander Threx and the senior Keeler officers reviewed the compiled data. No one asked him to sit. No one asked him to leave. That alone marked the shift. Graphs hovered in layered projections, each one repeating the same uncomfortable truth. Under variable conditions, rigid adherence to the codex degraded performance. Adaptive grip patterns, particularly those derived from human biomechanics, did not. Threx's crest lay flat against his skull, a sign Ward had learned to recognize as deep concentration rather than submission. "Our doctrine assumes that the operator must remain stable so the tool may function correctly," Threx said slowly. "Your method assumes the opposite." Ward nodded. "Tools don't exist in a vacuum. Neither do people." One of the senior researchers bristled. "If stability is abandoned, error increases." "Only if you define stability as stillness," Ward replied. "Humans define it as control." The word lingered. Threx dismissed the displays with a sharp gesture. The codex was written to eliminate variance. "And in doing so," Ward said gently, "you eliminated adaptability." Silence followed, but it was no longer defensive. It was evaluative. Threx turned away from the council and faced Ward directly. "Your species learned this through repeated failure." "Yes," Ward said. "And survival. You accept inefficiency during training in exchange for resilience under stress." Ward allowed a small smile. "That's one way to put it." Threx's mandibles flexed. "It will take time to retrain our forces." "It always does," Ward said. "But once learned, it doesn't break easily." A junior officer, male, barely masking his curiosity, stepped forward. "Professor," he said carefully, "when you first held the emitter, how did you know where to place your hands?" Ward considered the question. "I didn't," he said. "I listened." "To the device?" the officer asked. "To my body," Ward replied. "It tells you when something fits." Most species train that voice out of themselves. Threx studied the officer, then looked back at Ward. "You're suggesting we reverse that process." "I'm suggesting you remember it," Ward said. The council recessed shortly after, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. Doctrine would not be rewritten in a single session, but it had been cracked open. That was enough. Later, in the training annex, Threx stood alone with the emitter. No observers. No metrics. Just the tool and his own awareness. He adjusted his stance, loosening joints that had been locked by habit. His grip shifted, tentative, imperfect, alive. He fired. The shot struck near center. Not perfect. Better than before. Threx exhaled slowly. For the first time in many cycles, his arms did not ache. Behind the observation glass, Ward watched without interrupting. He had learned long ago that understanding could not be forced, only invited. Threx powered down the emitter and turned. "You will oversee the initial revisions," he said. It was not a request. Ward inclined his head. "I'll do what I can." As Threx moved to leave, he paused. "Professor." "Yes. Why did your species never write a codex like ours?" Ward thought of broken tools, scarred hands, and lessons learned too late to be gentle. "We tried," he said. Reality kept editing it. Threx considered that, then nodded once and departed. Ward remained where he was, watching the empty range. Somewhere beyond this facility, others would soon ask the same question that had started all of this. Why are you holding it like that? And slowly, inevitably, the answer would change. The chamber recalibrated around them, walls sliding inward by a fraction, as if narrowing its focus. Elias Ward felt the pressure change before the indicators confirmed it. Commander Threx noticed it too, his posture stiffened, training asserting itself the moment conditions shifted. "This configuration exceeds standard evaluation parameters," Threx said. Ward glanced at the ceiling where environmental controls hummed softly. "Real situations usually do." Threx did not reply. He raised the emitter, fingers locking into the codec's grip with reflexive certainty. Across the chamber, 3 targets rotated slowly, their surfaces shifting density in irregular patterns. This was no longer a controlled exercise. It was a stress trial. "Begin," Threx ordered. The first shot struck true, punching cleanly through the nearest target. The second followed, slightly wide but still effective. Threx adjusted his stance, redistributing weight exactly as trained. The chamber responded with a sudden gravitic fluctuation, subtle but relentless, pulling laterally at muscle and bone. Threx compensated again, jaw tightening. Ward watched closely, not the beam, but the body behind it. The locked elbows. The rigid wrists. The way strain climbed without release. Threx was fighting the environment, not working with it. "Your shoulders," Ward said calmly. "They're carrying everything." "I am stable," Threx replied, firing again. The shot clipped the target's edge. Stability alarms flickered amber. The chamber escalated. The floor vibrated now, not violently, but persistently, designed to erode precision over time. Heat followed, then a brief burst of auditory distortion that scraped across the senses. Threx's breathing grew audible. He fired again. The beam wavered and struck low. Ward stepped forward. "Let me show you something." Threx hesitated. Pride warred with necessity, then discipline won. He powered down the emitter and handed it over. Ward did not take position immediately. He rolled his wrists, flexed his fingers, and exhaled slowly. When he raised the emitter, his grip was different from before, not fixed, not loose, but responsive. His elbows bent slightly, shoulders relaxed, spine aligned but not rigid. He fired. The beam struck center mass. The gravitic pull tugged at him. Ward shifted his weight without thinking, knees absorbing the change. His wrists adjusted minutely, not correcting the motion but flowing through it. Another shot. Another clean hit. Threx watched, crest lifting despite himself. The chamber increased vibration. Ward's stance widened by a fraction. He let the movement travel through his body, dispersing it instead of resisting. Sweat formed at his brow, but his grip remained steady, alive with constant micro-adjustments. Shot after shot landed within optimal parameters. "How?" Threx demanded quietly. "Are you not compensating?" Ward lowered the emitter, but did not power it down. "I am," he said. "Just not consciously." He handed the device back. "Try again. Don't lock. Don't correct. Let it move." Threx stared at the emitter in his hands. His fingers twitched, uncertain. Slowly, he loosened his elbows. His stance shifted, awkward and unfamiliar. He raised the emitter and fired. The shot struck closer to center than his last attempt. Threx blinked. He fired again, adjusting instinctively this time instead of by doctrine. The result improved. The chamber pulsed with another disturbance. Threx nearly reverted, then stopped himself. He breathed out, allowed the motion to pass through him, and fired once more. Center mass. A low murmur spread among the observers. Threx lowered the emitter, staring at it as if it had changed shape. "This feels unstable." Ward smiled faintly. "It is." "And yet," Threx said, flexing his hands, "I am expending less force." "Because you're not fighting yourself," Ward replied. The chamber powered down gradually, systems returning to neutral. Targets retracted. Data streams froze, heavy with implications. Threx turned to the observers. "Record everything," he said, "especially the variance." Then he looked back at Ward. "Your method introduces uncertainty." "Yes," Ward said, "but it also survives it." Threx was silent for a long moment. Then he inclined his head, not in concession, but in recognition. "Prepare extended trials," he said. "This question is not resolved." Ward nodded. He had not expected it to be. As the chamber doors opened and the tension eased, Ward felt the familiar pull of momentum, the sense that something fundamental had shifted, even if no one yet admitted how far. The Codex still stood. Doctrine still ruled. But now there was a crack in it. And through that crack, something human was already taking hold. The Codex chamber had not been altered in centuries, yet Elias Ward felt as though the room itself had shifted. The same angular benches rose in disciplined tiers, the same inscriptions glowed faintly along the walls, but the atmosphere no longer pressed outward with absolute certainty. It listened. Commander Threx stood at the center dais, the resonance emitter resting on the stone before him. Around the chamber, senior Keeler officers gathered in formal silence, their attention divided between the ancient text projections and the human who had forced this assembly into existence without ever demanding it. Threx began, without ceremony. The extended trials confirmed the anomaly. No one corrected his phrasing. That, too, was new. Under variable stress, Threx continued. Operators trained in adaptive grip principles outperform Codex-only operators in accuracy, endurance, and recovery. His crest lowered fractionally. The data is consistent. Ward did not smile. Victory declared too loudly often invited resistance. He kept his hands folded, posture neutral, as though the results had been inevitable rather than disruptive. A senior tactician stepped forward. The Codex was designed to remove instinct from operation. Instinct is unreliable. Ward met the tactician's gaze. Only when it's ignored, he said. Instinct doesn't vanish when you suppress it. It goes underground. That's when it becomes dangerous. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Threx placed one hand on the emitter. The Codex assumes the universe will behave as expected. Professor Ward has demonstrated that it rarely does. Silence followed, dense and thoughtful. After a moment, Threx gestured, and the ancient projections shifted. New annotations appeared alongside the old doctrine, tentative, clearly marked as provisional. Human biomechanical principles translated into Keeler notation. Flexibility allowances. Feedback response ranges. Controlled variance. The Codex was not being erased. It was being amended. Ward felt the weight of that more than any applause could have offered. Training followed quickly, though quietly. Ward did not lecture. He corrected stances with small gestures, guided grips with brief touches, and spoke rarely. The Keeler learned slowly at first, unlearning rigid habits that had defined them for generations. But once the change took root, progress accelerated. Threx was among the most diligent. In private sessions, he practiced without observers, firing until sweat darkened the stone beneath his feet. Each cycle, his movements grew less forced, more fluid. His shots tightened. His recovery times shortened. One day, after a long session, Threx powered down the emitter and flexed his hands. There was no tremor. This would have been considered heretical, he said. Ward shrugged. So, was admitting the world was round. Threx studied him. Your species does not cling to certainty. We cling to what works, Ward replied. Then we let it go when it doesn't. In time, the question began to change. Junior officers no longer asked why the human grip differed. They asked how to feel the feedback sooner, how to trust it without losing control, how to teach it without turning it into another rigid rule. Ward answered when needed. More often, he simply watched. On the final day of his formal assignment, Ward stood behind the observation glass as Threx instructed a new cadre of trainees. The commander demonstrated the emitter grip, not as doctrine, not as imitation, but as a living process. When one trainee stiffened, Threx corrected him gently. Why are you holding it like that? Threx asked. The words carried no accusation, Only curiosity. Ward smiled. As he prepared to depart the facility, no escort accompanied him. None was needed. The work would continue without him now, evolving as it always should have. Beyond the station's hull, the universe waited, unpredictable, unstable, and endlessly indifferent to manuals. Humanity had learned to listen to it. Now, so had someone else.